Chapter 3, Place of the Birth, the Circumcision. Now, except for some of the alternative Gospels, we don't have Jesus preaching circumcision. In fact, we have more other reasons to think that he didn't. Muhammad also didn't preach circumcision. Bethlehem, the name, signifying house of bread. Some say it's a term for the constellation Virgo, which was one over, would have been September instead of an October constellation as the heliacal rising in the age of Pisces, but is one of the oldest towns in Palestine. Now, I don't like calling it Palestine because that was an ancient insult, and it was never called Palestine historically until the Romans conquered it, and then the British came up with calling it Palestine, but because the Tun is the female Satan, and the Push is the wallowing for, and that doesn't actually appear to be what the so-called Canaanites or whatever were called, but anyways, at least not self-designated. Having been in existence before Jacob's return to his native land, it is still existing. As to its location, there have never been doubts. It is identical with the present Beit Lechem, Beit Lechem, because I think it's CH, right? House of Flesh of the Arabs. It is 6 miles and 2 hours travel south from Jerusalem, east of the main road to Hebron. Robinson's Researches in Palestine, Volume 2, page 159, Matthew 1, Luke and Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus. Now, wasn't there at least 3 Bethlehems and at least 2 Nazareths? Bethlehem, Ephrath. The original name of the town was Ephrath, or Ephrata. I'd have to see the language because that doesn't quite sound right. Or unless you're saying Ephrata. In Micah 5:2, it is called Bethlehem Ephrata. Its first fame came to it from its being the birthplace of David, who, however, did nothing to advance it, even after his elevation to the throne. His ancestor Boaz had possessions here, and in some of the meadows in sight of the town of Ruth gleaned, but it never rose to the dignity of capital. The birth of Jesus has made it to be known to the whole world. Since that event, tradition has never lost sight of Bethlehem. Justin Martyr visited it in the 2nd century, Origen in the 3rd, afterwards Eusebius, Jerome, the Bordeaux pilgrim, and thousands of others. The Emperor Hadrian planted a grove of Adonis on the spot to desecrate it. This grove kept up the identification. It remained from 135 to 315 of the Common Era. About 330, Constantine, or the Empress Helena, erected a church which remains to this day. In the 12th century of the Common Era, it was elevated into an episcopal see. There is shown a cave in which Jesus is said to have been born, but the precise spot cannot now be known, and it seems absurd to suppose that cattle were kept 20 feet underground. But we know the town. The birth of Jesus in Bethlehem being coincident with the prophecies of the birthplace of the Messiah, the destructive critics attack it as being a false statement, but it is observable that no one has proved its incorrectness nor even presented anything worth calling an argument. Well, just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean it's not an argument, or not some sort of argumentation. For instance, Dr. Strauss, Book 131 says, but the opposite hypothesis as to the original dwelling place of his parents from which these evangelists start in the accounts they give shows that they are not following any historical authority, but simply a dogmatic conclusion drawn from the passage in the prophet Micah, chapter 5, verse 1. Can such modes mislead thinking men? A historian says that two people, husband and wife, live in New York, but finding it important to go to London in person on or before a given day to attend to matters of great importance, the wife is there delivered of a son. The distinguished subject of the historian's biography, and who afterwards spent a great part of his life in New York. Some subsequent critic says, nay, but he was born in New York, for does not the historian start with that as the original dwelling place of his parents. Such a critic would equal Dr. Strauss, but then Dr. Strauss proceeds on the theory that he was a native of Nazareth. Well, is it a theory or is it speculation? We'll see. Why not say he was born at Damascus? On what authority do these writers assume that he was born in Nazareth? On the authority of the evangelists. Dr. Strauss makes 15 references to the 4 evangelists, which, if the reader will consult, will be found to contain no statement whatever as to his birthplace, but simply to speak of Jesus as a Nazarene or a Galilean. 2. Matthew 26, 69, and 71. The oldest Gospels as far as that were the 19 chapters, so, whole chapters were added as time went on, but are the accusations made against Peter by women that he was an associate of Jesus of Galilee, or Jesus of Nazareth. A third is the speech of the unclean spirit, Mark 1:24. What have we to do with thee, thou Jesus of Nazareth? A fourth is Mark's account of what Matthew gives in chapter 26. A fifth is Luke 18:37, where the blind man inquires the meaning of the noise, and the multitude tell him that Jesus of Nazareth passes by. This is the amount of Dr. Strauss's argument. Okay, so it is a theory of sorts. It lies on the eastern and northeastern brow of a bridge, running east and west, from the top of which there is an extensive view towards the east and south in the direction of Jericho, the Dead Sea, and the mountains of Moab. The utter want of fairness is seen 3 ways. 1, in the case supposed above of an American born of American parents in London, his subsequently returning and being called Mr. Blank of New York, or Mr. Blank the American, would certainly not prove that he was born in New York, and most certainly not prove that he was not born in London. To take his reference to Luke, to prove that Jesus was born in Nazareth, he produces the reply of a miscellaneous crowd to a beggar. They called him a Nazarene. But if that passage in Luke be good authority, we must take the whole, what the beggar said as well as what the multitude said. The beggar cried out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Then Jesus was generally reputed to be the Son of David. But this Dr. Strauss denies, and because he is following simply a dogmatic conclusion drawn from his theory of myths, he is anxious to show that Jesus was not born in Bethlehem, the city of David, and was not the son of David at all, and was not believed to be the son of David. Leben Jesu, chapter 2. But his own authority confutes him. 3. He cites Luke 24:19 to prove that Jesus was born in Nazareth. Does Luke in that passage or anywhere else say so? Not at all. But this same Luke, Dr. Strauss, his witness, does say distinctly to 6 and 7 that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. In all this, there is nothing supernatural, so that Dr. Strauss might not answer that we had gone out of the region of realities. It is purely a matter of fact. If Dr. Strauss denied the whole and said no man knows where Jesus was born, it would be another thing. But he affirms that he was born in Nazareth. Well, again, if Jesus was for historical characters, some difference in where they were born and other stuff like that would explain a lot of this stuff. But it was no more miraculous to be born in Bethlehem than in Nazareth. But it does connect Jesus with the house of David, and does connect him with what the Jews regarded as a prophecy. And so obstinate is Dr. Strauss in his adherence to his naturalistic theory that no fair reader of his book can fail to see that there never was a theologic zealot more bent to his creed than Dr. Strauss to his dogma. But historians must avoid all dogmatism. Dogmatism is actually part and parcel of the way, right? But you don't hold firmly to opinion just because it's been passed on to you. M. Renan, chapter 2, says distinctly, Jesus was born at Nazareth. Why not say that he was born at Capernaum? What is his authority? He has none but Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew, Mark, and John. He cites Matthew 13:54. The reader will see upon inspection that there is not the slightest allusion whatever to the birthplace of Jesus or any other person in any portion of this chapter. It simply speaks of the return of Jesus to his own country, but does not say where that country is, and if it be assumed to be Nazareth, that would not prove that he was born there, as thousands of men who were born in Europe speak of America as their country, since it has been their place of residence for many years. And that's true. And if you're going to put something else in front of it as your nationality, you really should have been there, right? Or contain dual citizenship or something, right? This nonsense where people are just a different color of skin or something, and they're like, oh, well, you're blank American. It's like, well, come on, there isn't really any even racial culture anymore, and so-called racial cultures are being promoted by people of other races, and they decide that this one race, this one color or race, or but anyways, the fact that in manhood Jesus should speak of Nazareth as his country and others should so speak of him has no bearing on the question of the place of his nativity. But how does M. Renan know that this is a fact? On the authority of Matthew. Then Matthew is his witness, and he says explicitly that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. 2:1.